Hey, Hurt. How you doing?
I'm doing great. It's Friday
Hey,
afternoon. I had a
it is
full week.
Friday after, and we got a new president. Can you believe that?
It's been a full week for sure.
Man, that's exciting. So today on the news roundup, Herd and I are coming to you just after President Trump was inaugurated as his second term earlier this week. And we've got a series of 5 or 6 stories just to go through. You good to kind of go through some of these
Jump
things?
into it.
Okay. Well, today there was one, and it's called Stargate. And that sounds very sci-fi, right? You remember that movie Stargate
I
with
do remember that. Yeah.
I like that. That was a good one. But anyway, this one's called, I bet Elon had something to do with the name of this, but Stargate is $100 billion initiative by a number of entities, including, I believe, the federal government, with OpenAI, SoftBank, and Oracle in particular. And it's the largest AI infrastructure project in history. And President Trump is moving boldly into that, whereas there was some real hesitancy on President Biden's term around putting some checks and balances and safeguards with AI. But President Trump is this was the sentence that I thought was really interesting. Is that last sentence in this Becker's Hospital Review article that was just published this morning on the 24th, and it was around AI development rooted in free speech and human flourishing. How do you like that, Herd?
That sounds interesting. Certainly, new administration, new priorities. When you look at who with Elon Musk and who was backing the Trump candidacy towards the end, not surprising to see something like this.
Yeah.
I think it'll be interesting. I mean, AI is sort of has been everywhere, and I think it will continue to be everywhere. So this is one of those initiatives from a healthcare standpoint. We'll see what's in store. So I think more to come on this one.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what human flourishing is, but that's fine. When I talk to hospital folks, they say, "What am I supposed to do with AI?" And I have to tell them, I'm like, there's a lot of unknowns right now. Beyond the use of Chat GPT is something that's kind of helpful and interesting, more of a super Google. There's a lot that's out there, but we're in kind of the baby steps of it that a lot of it's unproven, and many hospitals are really struggling on how to put it in right now.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of promise, a lot of hype,
Mhm.
frankly, with a lot of it. But it's like this very powerful tool. But then, how can we actually adopt it to use cases and actually gain, have efficiency gains, have the gains that are promised and that are really baked into the valuation of a lot of these AI companies.
Yeah.
Again, that's I think too soon to tell. The jury's still out, but it's certainly a very powerful tool, a very powerful technology. Something like this means it's not going away, and there's sort of the AI arms race. I think with lots of other countries, I do want to proceed with some caution. And something this new and this powerful, we need to make sure we understand it. And so it'll be interesting to see what side of the spectrum we're on. It sounds like we're full speed ahead right now with the new administration. The prior administration was maybe a little more cautious, and
Yeah.
so we'll figure out what where the happy medium lies.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think it's kind of cool to think about the human flourishing, even though I have no idea what that means. But in such a regulated industry like healthcare, like you've got to make sure you check all these boxes before you can get paid. I'm going to deny you 3 times before you get you. Well, AI maybe can help in some of those intermingling processes, but it needs to be done with some tension on it, in my opinion.
Well, I think if you think about human flourishing, the key part of that is human, and so let's make sure we don't lose the human aspect of anything with
Yeah.
all the technology.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so second report is around the feds are putting private equity back in the bullseye. And so there's a Modern Healthcare article on January 16th of this year, 25, and it's talking about how that there's additional skepticism. There's all this lack of transparency for PE-backed entities. There's some vertical integration worries, and then there's some provider consolidation worries with kind of post-acquisition ops and the ethics of operating those entities from a private. And this is coming on the heels of the Steward debacle and kind of nightmare that occurred in 24, with all those Steward hospitals being community hospitals that have needed to be picked up or closed, one or the other, which is a real shame. And it comes at the, unfortunately, because of some, the way that some private equity came in and then the way the deal was structured, and then it just escalated out of control. And that was a terrible, terrible story. So that federal scrutiny has continued. In this Modern Healthcare article on the 16th highlights some of the things that the feds are going to continue to watch this year, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. This is sort of a last minute thing that came out with the prior administration. It'll be interesting to see what carries over. I think with the Federal Trade Commission and with Linda Kahn, who was head of that under the Biden administration, certainly had a very much a antitrust bent, a scrutiny on all transactions. I think the new administration's already promised that some of that's going to change. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we don't want bad actors that are giving the entire community a bad name. So I'm hopeful to see there's some self-policing that occurs. And also it'll be interesting to see what the new administration does. Again, that's kind of up in the air. I think there's a more pro-transaction bent, but we'll see, because there's also a pro worker and a pro, there's a lot of, with the coalition that helped elect Trump, there's an inherent tension inside the current administration.
Yeah. Yeah. Just before we got on, we were looking at actually the Bain website, one of the biggest PE firms, funds out there. And we found that there is between 275 and 295 trillion dollars of available funds to invest. And so the thought that this is going to stop private equity investments into the healthcare and life sciences sector is folly. There will be funds in a capital market that are trying to get into healthcare because it is a good, solid revenue engine, profitability, and the ability to exit. Those are kind of the three components from a private equity. So in my opinion, private equity is here, and there probably is a very, very good need for it to be monitored for safe usage.
Sure. And I think if healthcare needs innovation, it needs efficiency, there's a lot that it needs that requires capital. And so there has to be capital to support that.
No, that's right. The third story is just going back to UnitedHealth. With the murder last year of their CEO, they have continued to have scrutiny. And this is a Modern Healthcare article on January 16th. They came out and said that the UnitedHealth Group CEO came back and said, we are listening and we are going to respond to the prior auths, and I believe the denials, but in particular, the prior authentication or authorization problems that especially Medicare Advantage patients are trying to get to. There is just a wall that they run into with UnitedHealth. And the CEO, the big CEO over UnitedHealth Group, has said, we hear you and we are now committed to work with you to do something. No details in that, but it was interesting that they are at least listening and ready to respond to that.
Yeah, I think that was one of those stories that still quite frankly shocked me. I don't think the tragedy that happened to this man who had a family. I don't think that's the right way to answer anything and handle problems at all. But it is interesting that it has brought in a lot of scrutiny, and so this is one of those interesting stories that come out. I still don't think it excuses what happened at all.
Oh no, nor do I. The next story is from Healthcare Dive and the 17th of January, and it's really talking about the what happened in the M&A hospital M&A market in 24. And when you really look at that, it was a series of divestitures and distressed deals. And so typically we look at a year in review from an M&A perspective, and we think, oh, wow, these amazing transactions, mergers or acquisitions happened during the course of a year. And 24 is a little bit more of a scar on that map, where there were a lot of divestitures. A lot of the bigs were getting rid of kind of non-core assets or underperforming assets. And there was a lot of distressed deals. And Steward in particular was a highly distressed deal trying to offload those hospitals. Ultimately, many of those did not make, and they had to shutter, which is very sad. But I thought that's an interesting way to reflect on the year, right, Herd?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that Steward being a very high profile example. I think we've sort of seen this in the industry. You have large health systems that are well run, that seem to be getting stronger, seem to have very robust strategies and how to kind of operate in new environment as far as changing its sites of service, et cetera. But then you also have a lot that are struggling still. And so
Mm-hmm.
you're sort of seeing this bifurcation in the industry between like the really big, real well-run facilities and then the ones that frankly struggle because of whether it's payer mix and
Right.
efficiencies and struggle with profitability. I think it's interesting to see that some of these mergers that were maybe done to help fix some of that still having some issues, and I think that's what you're going to see pop up. And so I
Yeah.
think you're going to continue to see the industry struggle some with kind of the between the haves and the have-nots, I'll call it, and how do we address that? Because again, healthcare needs to be in the communities. People need healthcare. We need to make sure people are taken care of. And so how does that occur when you have some of these challenging financial situations?
Mm-hmm. I look forward to seeing what happens this year. To me, I think it's going to be a little bit more of a healthy year where, you and I reported, I don't know, maybe a couple of times ago, where it's been proven that the hub and spoke method works. We're so worried about the rural hospitals and their ability to survive, critical access in rural hospitals. If they're able to latch on to a larger kind of a hub, kind of a mothership, there's like a 30% bump in the likelihood that they can survive because of that overall financial strength. I hope there's more of that occurs. I hope that the FTC kind of comes off of the kind of the wall that they've been presenting over the last 4 years, unfortunately, for really killing market centric deals, which has caused this adjacent geography deal, like for example, Advocate and then Intermountain and some of the others where they've gone these geography adjacent deals as opposed to in market. I hope 25 has a lot more just activity on that front, that we'll look back and it won't be divestitures and distressed. It'll be more of strengthening our financial position to get to a better spot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we need to have access and need to make sure that the care is there to be had.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, two more stories heard. The last one is kind of more like, oh, geez, that's weird. More from an actuarial perspective of looking at the U.S. population, and it's U.S. deaths expected to outpace births within the decade. And so to me, that is like, oh my goodness, when we really take a hard look at the generational differences, that kind of makes sense. We're seeing the younger people now choose to elongate youth or elongate the time frame before I marry and have children, if at all. And so we're seeing that certainly in China and overseas in Asia. We're seeing a big um, difference there. The seesaw is going the other way as far as population because aging longer, birth rates are way lower. And now in the US, we're seeing a little bit of the difference that we're going to have deaths outpace births, which tells me the population is going to be going the other way. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, you see this phenomenon in developed nations around the world. I mean, you see it in Europe. You mentioned China. You mentioned Asia. I mean, Japan is very similar. You see this happening in European countries, and it just seems to be a something that occurs when you reach a certain stage of development. U.S. has sort of hasn't quite been there, but now it sort of seems like maybe we are. And then that's when you really start getting into what are the implications of something like this, especially
Yeah.
in healthcare, where those future doctors going to come from, what needs will be needed for an older population that has less people to help be in these service professions or provider type professions. That's where back to innovation and efficiency, it's going to require that to kind of get through that if you have less people to do things. So certainly
Yeah.
interesting. It's one of those mega trends that you can't project out. It may change. You never know because you can't just project that completely into infinity. But certainly for thinking about the future, it's something that needs to be in the equation and how we're going to deal with it. So I think it'll be interesting to see what kind of implications it has on healthcare.
Well, I got into it with a panel that I spoke at in Nashville a couple of months ago about Kyle, you're not thinking about the long-term utilization trends because of differences in generations.
Yeah.
Historically, we've looked at the 21 to 40-year-olds that are historically always our healthiest generation that require the least amount of utilization in our care system because of a more sedentary lifestyle, a less active lifestyle for a lot of our younger people. We're seeing higher chronic illnesses, higher use of our healthcare system, and over time, it's changing the trajectory of what kind of utilization we're going to be forecasting. I think this goes right in with that. If we're going to have a wonky population as opposed to a very predictable, plus that unexpected utilization, that just makes for interesting stuff for you and me to think about. So with the final story, it's something a little scary, but I'm grateful for it. If somebody does something wrong, I hope they get caught. And so this one is around a Texas high. So right in our backyard, a Texas hospital CEO sentenced to federal prison for a role in healthcare kickback conspiracy. And this is straight out of the Department of Justice, out of the U.S. Attorney's Office of Eastern District of Texas. And they're talking about a hospital CEO that was in this kickback scheme, and that hospital is going to jail. Or I'm sorry, the hospital CEO is going to jail. So, you typically don't see these kind of white collar crimes being reported like this, but this CEO was caught and sentenced in federal courts, and now he's off to federal jail. So that's a big deal, right, Herb?
Yeah, a real big deal. I think there are several others that were involved in this that are also going to jail. You certainly don't see it very often, especially from a CEO standpoint. You've seen some physicians, and you see usually billing matters where there's some sort of billing fraud. It's first time I can remember seeing a management actually get sentenced for something like this.
Yeah.
It was an interesting, just the whole scheme was very kind of complicated, but it's something that I remember hearing about this arrangement where you're basically turning a hospital into a reference lab and then going
Right.
out and getting physicians to refer to it, and then there's a kind of a money getting kicked back to them. And I remember kind of when I first saw this model and first saw heard people talking about it, I was like, something about that didn't sound right. So I'm not surprised, and maybe this is good, just to see people held accountable for trying to take advantage of the system.
Well, you would think there had to be, there's all kind of whistleblower programs, and my hope is that somebody, one of these sweet people that's working in the business office that's cutting checks and AP or whatever, and they're like, wait a minute, why am I cutting a check over to the CEO personally? Because that's not right. And those safeguards are in play. Having been a former operator in the healthcare world, those safeguards are in play, and you have to keep that integrity sound. And so, frankly, I'm glad that this occurred and came to light so that we can kind of diminish as much as we can. I mean, it's hard enough to trust the healthcare system, much less if you've got fraud in there. So I think it's good to get it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, Herd, hey, thanks for chatting with me on these handful of issues. Hope you guys have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon.